This is the second part of how to make bread, how to make Grandpa's bread. And this one we're going to show you what the ingredients are and how to mix them up. We have some flour. This is Bob's Red Mill all-purpose flour. Uh, Usually I use red flour, but today we're going to be using an all-purpose flour. It doesn't really make a hell of a lot of difference, I don't think. We're going to use instant yeast. This is bread machine yeast. Works just fine. Got some salt. This is Mediterranean sea salt. I'm sure that will help it be better. And then we're going to add some water. Now sometimes we put ice in the water. We're not going to do that today, but we'll talk about that when we get to that part. We need some tools. Well, this thing will help us get the bread flour out of there and into our container. We've got a container to hold all the ingredients. We've got a scale, which is important to us, and we'll talk about that. And we have a thing called a dough whisk. Now you don't need this, you just use an old spatula if you got one, and that'll work just fine. This happens to work pretty good. I got it off of I think Amazon or eBay or somebody, and I just started using it, and it's reasonably easy to use. And then of course you need a container to hold the water in a bit. Now we'll start with the scale, and the scale's a tricky little thing. Very clever. You turn it on, and then you select what you're going to use. I just sent some things by the post office, so it's currently on pounds and ounces. We're going to switch it over to grams, which everything. If you work everything in grams, it's easy to accomplish. Now the thing that's tricky about the scale is that if you put something on the scale, it starts measuring it right away, but what we're interested in is what we're going to have in there. So you press the on button again, and it zeroes it. Now we have just the weight of what we had ever put in that, and it's called TARE, or tare weight. Truckers call it that. I don't have any idea where that came from, but anyway, that's what we do. So we'll start. We're going to get some flour in here. Start by getting the outside weight of this thing and zero it. And we're going to start with today we're going to use 1,000 grams of flour. Now that will make about 6 of the loaves that I usually make, baguette loaves. You could use half that or a fourth of it. In fact, some later time I'll make a video about cooking on a boat, baking bread on a boat, and we used I think just a little over a cup of flour on that process, but we'll show you that another time. The important thing is to know how much you're going to use, because we're going to take a proportion of that to add in water. So first of all, we'll measure out our flour. And of course you can get this stuff all over yourself, make a hell of a mess. That's almost a half there. That's 594. We want 1,000. $711. We're getting there. $885. This is probably going to take us over, and we'll have to dish some back out. Yep, that got to 1,017. So take the wheel back out. $1,011. It doesn't have to be too precise, but There's $9.99. That'll work for us. Okay, we can set that aside because we're done with the flour now, for the moment. We'll use some flour for dusting and stuff tomorrow, but right now we're done with it. Now, the next thing we need is some salt and yeast. And I'm going to run in and get a little cup to measure. Okay, I'm back with some equipment to measure out the yeast and salt with. This is a container we'll use, and again we just zero that. And we're going to look for about 2 teaspoons of yeast. And it turns out you could probably get by with 1. If you went up to 3, it probably wouldn't hurt anything, but I'm going to use 2 for this much. And that's 6. And there's 12. Now it turns out that if you buy a package of dry yeast, that's about how much you'll get. So it works out pretty easily. Again, it's not, I don't think it's particularly critical. Some recipes and some authors really get upset if you use too much yeast or too little. But I think this will be just fine for our purposes. Sprinkle it in there. Now the next thing we're going to add is a bit of salt. Again, I use about, for 1,000 grams of flour, we'll use about 15 grams of salt. There's 14, 15. Wow, that's amazing. Came out just right. So we'll set that aside. We're all done with our yeast and flour. And now we got to mix this stuff. Okay, this is a 2-stage process. We're going to start with the dry ingredients and mix that all up, and then we're going to add the flour. So to mix that stuff, we're going to use our whisk, and I'm going to move over to my easy chair to do this. So we'll take a break while we're doing that. So you just stir it all up. Okay, it takes a while to get it all stirred up. So I like to go over and sit down while we're doing that. Okay, we got this all mixed up pretty good. Now we're going to have to add the water. And if you'll excuse me for a minute, I'm going to run in and get some reverse osmosis water. Vicki likes it with nice, clean, clear water instead of what just comes out of the well. So I'm back. Did you see what I did wrong? I forgot to get the empty weight of this pitcher. We need that to make sure we got the right amount of water. So we'll set the pitcher on there. Oops, turn it on. Set the pitcher on there. Zero it. There. Now we can go get our water. So here I am back with the water. Put it on the scale and we got a little over. Now remember, we had 1,000 grams of flour. We're going to do a 90% mix. So we did 90% of 1,000 grams, which would be 900 grams of water. So we've got 1,057. We got to take a little out. Where'd my cup go? I think we'll use something else. We'll just use this container here. About 15. 958. 910. 902. Close enough for this process. Now, we just add it to the flour and we'd be ready to mix again. Now at this point we're done with our measuring stuff and we can put it all away, and I'm going to go mix this up back on my easy chair. That's mixing pretty good. Sometimes you have to mess her a little bit to get it out of the corners of the container you're using. But if you keep stirring, and if you got a lump or two left in it, it's not going to break anybody's heart, because it'll still come out as good bread. Okay, I'm back with the mixed dough, and you can see it here. See how it looks. I got a little cleaning up to do on this dough whisk. That's one of the pains of doing bread, is that mixtures like library paste, when you get done, and it makes a mess of all your utensils, so it's important to get them under water as quickly as you can, and get them, keep them wet until you get a chance to clean them out. So put a cover on this, and it's going to go in the ice until tomorrow, and we're going to let it rise overnight. The next video, we're going to show you how we stretch and fold it and shape it into a loaf. Then the final one, we'll bake it. Here we're going into the ice chest. We got a little ice sitting in here. The bread dough will go in there, and it'll sit for about well, overnight. We'll probably do it tomorrow afternoon. One thing more before I put this away. I wanted to show you that the dough that's in this container is about that tall in the container. It's going to triple in size as it rises, so it'll come up to about here when it's ready to stretch and fold. You have to have a container that's big enough that's going to contain that, and it also gives you a fair indication of when things are wrapping up and done. So back in the ice chest. See you tomorrow.